Okay, so I'm welcoming you back from the break. I'm also going to be John Wagner today. John could not be here because of a family emergency, and so I am not going to. I'm not going to say I am John Wagner. I am going to try to do my best to go through what John was going to talk about, and I'm going to try to do it very quickly. And so if I can start, this is going to be the intro of the case studies. How did we get here? Why are we here? Because in a nutshell, this workshop, as good as the discussion's already been, is really about the discussion around these case studies that will help us frame our view of how we do the development process in the future. So, the goals of the workshop, you've heard more than once. It's to define the vocabulary, identify some medical needs, and to try to begin to and continue to ensure alignment. I am going to go fast and jump over some of these slides. All right, so this is John's representation of the issue, which is the digital or biomarker in this case, or whatever, Tower of Babel, and it's always been that language confusion hinders the medical practice and drug development, and for a number of reasons. And we're trying to use best we can, but it's not really been addressed with respect to remote monitoring or digital monitoring. So we've tried to take a stab at that. We have, as you have in your slides, in your folder, some disclaimers for the workshop lexicon. We've tried to start with some ideas. They may not be totally appropriate, but that's what the workshop is for. We'll try to use digital measure as opposed to a digital biomarker, digital COA, that's what we're in this case using. Device will be used exclusively for when we have something that's in the FDA's definition of a medical device, and Dr. Patel will tell us about that in a little while. And for those issues where a device is not cleared, we're calling it technology, all right? So this is not meant to be read, but the idea here, and stop squinting and trying to, it's not going to happen. The idea with this is these case studies were picked with thought. Not because somebody just had an idea of what they wanted to talk about or work on, but because we were trying to address a global need. So the planning team pulled together about 25, 30 different case studies with various different characteristics. We addressed those characteristics in a flow diagram. This is looks very, I actually like this, because what we did was, we said, how do these plan out with respect to an existing measure versus a novel measure? As Chris had mentioned earlier, we kind of asked, is it wearable? Is it a smartphone? Is it something that's commercial, et cetera? And these were kind of where the suggestions played out. We also had some criteria that we wanted to follow. We felt that neurodegeneration, neuropsychiatric diseases, behavior will have a huge impact, or the field can have a huge impact in this area. So we wanted to at least have a couple of neuro cases. We wanted to be able to compare commercial versus cleared, novel versus existing, black box. You can read it. So this is kind of how we went about that, and we ended up with the 5 case studies that you see in your agenda. And we're going to start out with a case study on Parkinson's disease, which has already been mentioned already, and it's kind of governed or based on what evidence has been identified in the EMPOWER trial. We'll have a really nice discussion around cardiac monitoring in phase 1 clinical trials from Elena Ismailova. I'm sure I said that wrong. We're going to have a discussion around continuous glucose monitoring, stride velocity, and major depressive disorder. All of these folks have been working on this for the last 4 or 5 months. in the last couple of weeks. We've been talking to them every week or so. So there's a lot of work that's been done. I think this is going to be really, really an interesting set of case studies. The case studies there to put some clear meat around the theoretical of how you would do something. This is not theoretical about how you would do it. This is the real thing. This is people trying to figure out how to move these things forward. You've already heard about the evidentiary criteria framework. The goal of this meeting and the goal of those case studies is to take the case study, try to plan out what you would do or try to describe what you did in order to get to your end result of a decision-making tool using this framework. And the goal has been very much to identify those areas where it fits and where we could continue to use it and where it doesn't and where the gaps need to be filled by a new approach or additional language, additional thought process. Suffice it to say that evidentiary criteria framework is many years in the making with many hands, many of you in the room, but many not in the room. This is a process that's been going on for at least 4 or 5 years. So, and has ended up as actually an FDA guidance document. I think it's not a draft anymore, a draft guidance. All right, so what's the framework provide? This was in your information that you got, so I'm not going to go through this, but the bottom line is it's supposed to make life easier for us, right? Discussed analytical validation, clinical validation. These are things that are in the framework that will be discussed and kind of thought about. One of the issues that came up when we were going through all of this time with the case studies discussions was that within even the case studies, we sometimes had a difficulty understanding what we were talking about when we said data. Was it raw data, process data, transfer data, whatever, right? So one of the things that we thought would help some of that discussion is to actually map this out. We're not the only ones to do this. And in fact, it can be more complicated or less complicated, but this is just something you may see in some of the case studies that will help guide some of the discussion. We have within each of those processes, we're going to have different types of data that is necessary. These different types. Again, this is in some of the pre-read materials, but there are different situations where this kind of data is necessary. It's not necessary for every single biomarker or for every single situation, but it is, and it will be dependent upon whether the risk that's there, the benefit, what kind of expectation is generated. So again, I'm going to jump through this, and the conclusion here is that this is meant to align stakeholders and to try to get people to make it easier. I mean, it's complicated enough. Let's try to make the process and the discussion easier. You'll notice when people go through their slides for the case studies, we've used a template. So everybody kind of runs through the same set of questions and discussions. And so just to give you a little bit of insight into what we've kind of forced upon them, maybe, or asked them to follow, depending if you're, being nice or not. I just wanted to go through this. So the one point that we made over and over again is that the biomarker and the COA is about the biology. It's about the person. It's not about the platform or the way that we're doing the measurement, all right? It's important how we do that measurement, but it's really about the person. So Pamela said that. We have multiple people recognizing it's about the person. All right, so we go back to the evidentiary criteria. Within the statement of need, which Chris mentioned, it's about how is this needed and why digital, right? Why remote? Why, what does it matter? The context of use will always be the context of use. I don't think this changes. I don't think it will change. But I'm going to be a little provocative there. Throw it out if you think it should. You let us know. There needs to be some discussion around the benefit. there needs to be discussion around the risk, because that's what decides how much evidence you need, all right? And so, and what kind of evidence you have, and what kind of evidence you don't have but still need in order to make that tool a confident decision-making tool. So that's where this comes from. And then comes the panel discussion. So each one of these will go through, each one of the case studies will go through their presentation. I'm going to kind of be a little bit more grumpy about getting people to go through it at the time, in the time frame that we've been asked. But then the panel discussions is really where we get into the meat, which is, does the framework actually help? And if it doesn't, why not? When will it get in the way? What's missing? How can it be modified? And also suggested changes to best. So with that, I'm done. So I did it in 10 minutes. And so with that, I'm going to ask the Empower folks, the group from the first case study, to come up. I think we're going to have kind of a multi-meeting, multi-person discussion for each of these case studies. And so now I'm going to hand that off to Jen and her group to talk about the next case study.